Facebook post today. Yeah, you just want to give me the memory. I was planning on giving you the memory card. It's Jasmine who was here with Debbie. If she back from photos, she's not like the contact today.
Yeah.
We'll let her know.
Cool. Sounds good. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
Grab it. There's one of my tables.
Okay.
So you're doing good?
Do me a favor.
Yeah. Can you announce the food? Is it
Oh,
right?
perfect. This mic is off.
Good afternoon, everyone. The food is ready, so please help yourselves and we can start serving.
That was good. Thank you. Okay, you're welcome. So,
Wow, the one thing I didn't do was print my script, so.
oh, I have an extra one. We have one upstairs. So you can be fine.
Okay.
And just like, we did scratch out.
Not blinding me. this
No,
time.
and we did change this one, but it will be on your script with the new one. So we just scribbled that out and wrote it. right.
So we got-
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay, testing, 1, 2, 3, test. Hmm. Yeah, turn it on.
Hi, everyone. We were supposed to have a speaker today, but he's not here, obviously. Does anybody want to fill in? Anybody saying that? Just kidding. I know you do. You did very well, but thank you for volunteering. No, Secretary St. Ray is at a sled board meeting evidently, and he is planning on being here, so they're about 20 after, so we're gonna go on with our program, so thanks for your patience. Just want to welcome everyone and say good afternoon. We're pleased that you joined us today for the Chamber Luncheon. We've got a great program lined up for you. Before we begin, I would like to thank Safe Harbor Children's Justice for being our presenting sponsor today. We're so appreciative of your support. Please join me in welcoming Lynn Story Hilar, speaking on behalf of Safe Harbor Children's Justice.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity. I am the Executive Director of Safe Harbor, a Children's Justice Center, and we're here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And April, if you didn't know, is Child Abuse Awareness Month. And I'm here to bring some awareness to the issues that we have here in Wyoming County. But I can't begin this conversation without first thanking the many dedicated agencies who carry out the mission of protecting children every single day here in Wyoming County. So if they would stand to be recognized, here at my table today, I have Wyoming County District Attorney Sylvia Hackle, Laramie County Sheriff Brian Kozak, Laramie County Department of Family Services District Manager Chad Dunley, CASA of Laramie County, Jennifer Finliden, and our victim advocate from Safe Harbor, CJ Pickler. These are some amazing people that every day are in the trenches working to protect our children. And I'm so appreciative that they could be here today. So Safe Harbor began in 1999, over 23 years ago, as a community response. At that point in time, kid cases were kind of falling through the cracks and kids were maybe not being as protected as they could be. So at that time, this community came together and adopted a collaborative approach to protecting children. They adopted the model of a child advocacy center. Now there are child advocacy centers nationwide. There are over 900 accredited child advocacy centers nationwide. Safe Harbor is one of those accredited child advocacy centers. And our national organization is called National Children's Alliance. We have an umbrella that's over all of us. To understand what a CAC is, I'd like to play a quick video for you. So if you'll play the first video.
A Children's Advocacy Center, or CAC, provides support to victims of child abuse. Without a CAC, an abused child may have to tell their story over and over again in settings that may be scary or where kids may think that they're in trouble. Then, families have to search around for the services their children need, all on their own. But in a CAC, a child tells their story to a trained interviewer who makes the process gentle on the child and finds the facts which are crucial to the child's case. Then, a community of professionals in medicine, law enforcement and child protective services, prosecution, victim advocacy, and other heroes work through the CAC to decide the best way to help the child. And CACs provide science-backed mental health care that heals kids from trauma and helps them reclaim their futures. This community of caring professionals rallies around the child so children have everything they need, all in one place, at the CAC. To find your local CAC or to sign up for updates, visit nationalchildren'salliance.org.
So child abuse continues to be a significant problem in the United States and here in Laramie County as well. So some statistics about Laramie County in 2022, Safe Harbor forensically interviewed 146 children 68 of those were victims of sexual abuse, 34 were victims of physical abuse, 8 were victims of neglect, 12 were witnesses of domestic violence, 23 were exposed to drug usage in the home, and 1 was a victim of child pornography. Child abuse is a crime perpetrated on the innocent and the defenseless. Child abuse occurs at every socioeconomic level, across all ethnic lines, cultural lines, within all religions and all levels of education. Every Laramie County child deserves a safe and nurturing childhood, yet too often, children are subjected to abuse and neglect by those responsible for their care. So consider some of these facts. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys will be sexually abused by an adult sometime during childhood. 90% of those who molest are family members or someone the child knows. For every incident of child abuse or neglect that gets reported, it is estimated that 2 others go unreported. More than 20,000 images of child pornography are posted online every week, and child pornography is estimated to be a $3 billion industry. Children whose parents are unemployed have about 3 times the rate of child abuse and 2 times the rate of neglect than with parents who are employed. Child sex offenders molest on average of 117 children, most of those who do not report their offense. A study of prison inmates found that 84% were abused as children. So we can see that child abuse casts a shadow the length of a lifetime. We must understand that the combined professional wisdom and skills of a multidisciplinary team like we have today is the best and most effective way that we can focus on eradicating child abuse. We must all accept that simply talking about the problem is not going to make it go away. So collectively, we all have to work together to eliminate the risks. So in order to do that, we want you to be part of that process. In order to do that, we're going to need to have a community approach. And let me say that again, we're going to have a community approach from elected officials, businesses, family members, agency staff, teachers, bus drivers, store clerks, and all others who come in contact with families and children. So we play the second video, please. For listening to my presentation. Children are our most vulnerable population, but they're our most precious resource. The children of Laramie County are not only counting on all of us to do our part, their lives sometimes are dependent upon it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Glenn, and for all the people that are here. All that you do. Anyhow, thank you again to our sponsor. We want to extend a special thank you to the bronze sponsors for today's luncheon. Crowell Inc. CM Outdoor Living. And Appalachia Broadcast. Thank you. We just could not do what we do without all of our generous sponsors. I would like to welcome Barbara Brennan from Harmony Hearth and Home and the Red Carpet Committee to come forward to introduce our new partners.
Every month, when you come to the chamber luncheon, you should see some of us in red. I know there might be people in red who are not part of our committee, but the red carpet committee likes to announce ourselves with our bright red. We are the welcoming committee. We serve several roles within the chamber, and one of our primary roles is to welcome new partners to the chamber. And I get to introduce some of those partners to you today. By the way, if you would like to join the red carpet committee, please do approach Mary Jane from the chamber or one of us who is wearing red. And if you're not part of the committee and you're wearing red, you should probably join. Okay, so today we just have a small list of people to introduce. We will start with Blue Frog Roofing. John Sokol, Corey Bresch, and Johnny Sanders. Blue Frog Roofing is a premier residential and commercial roofing contractor offering premium products, quality craftsmanship, and a reputation you can trust. With a strong focus on building lasting relationships, they strive to provide excellent service and the highest levels of craftsmanship to every residential and commercial project. You can be confident in the outcome of your project with Blue Frog Roofing. Welcome to the chamber. Next, we have Flat Hemp Company, Stacy Schultz. Flat Hemp is a family and veteran-owned company that offers a wide variety of U.S. grown and harvested CBD products, including hemp flower, vape, pre-roll, accessories, and even CBD for pets. They carry an array of hemp CBD devices. Flat Hemp team stays educated and up to date on CBD products and will help you with proper use. Are you interested in a glass blowing class? Contact Flat Hemp for glass blowing classes. Welcome to the chamber. And then we have Mark's Plumbing, Stephen Ventura and Adriana Hammond. Mark's Plumbing has been a trusted residential and commercial plumbing and heating contractor in Cheyenne for about 50 years. There's no plumbing job or problem it hasn't seen or can't handle. Do you know they service and replace furnaces, boilers, and air conditioning units? Also, their teams maintain sewer lines and mainline drains. So don't sink your time and money into trying to do it yourself. Call the experts at Mars. Welcome to the chamber.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Easter. Okay. For some of our friends, happy Passover, but we hope the holidays are blessed for you, however you choose to celebrate. You know, I was sitting and watching those videos, and I was at a meeting last week with U.S. Chamber for Committee of 100, and we were talking about work. You know, we're talking about how do we build this future workforce. All the numbers are against us, right? How many of you need help right now? Right? There's a lot of hands being raised. Right? Well, how do we come up with those numbers when our population, there's 1 million less children being born every year in this country? It's the first time we've seen a native-born population decrease in the history of the world. Some of our kids coming up, you know, everybody opines that they don't have work ethic or they don't do this, don't do that like we like them. And so we're trying to figure out all these tricks to do that. So here's the deal. Kid grows up in one of these circumstances. If we don't fix that, they're gonna be your workforce, right? So then if we as adults don't fix the problem and don't help with the problem, we're gonna deal with it later. So as Chamber of Commerce, you know, I often get asked, why would you deal with issues like this and others that come up? It's because it's the future of our country, right? It's our future workforce. I got a chance to hear somebody that many of you may know, Chris Steyerwalt last weekend, and one of the comments he made was, in his opinion, human beings have one superpower, and that superpower is coalition building. That especially in America, when we find a problem and we get together and go to work on that, there is very little that we can solve. So as the Chamber of Commerce, it's one of our goals is to identify problems and to deal with it, whether that be with education or homes or housing, workforce, etc. So thank you guys for coming today and talking to us about that. Also, I'm glad that when I see the district attorney and the sheriff, Sheriff Kozak, good to see you. And when I see them together, I'm seeing them on a social level and not a professional. Few things happening this month and going on in our community that I'll share with you. You know, one thing, we are getting ready to do our annual jaunt to Washington, D.C., and you wonder why we do that. I will tell you why we do that. In 2010, when we sat down and started talking about hiring a consultant and to work on funding for our community, Cheyenne and Wyoming was actually 54th in receiving federal funds. So I don't know how you even get to be 54th, but we have some little distant islands. And Secretary, glad you can make it. I know you're us for it today. We appreciate it very much. But since that time, we're at, with the last count, $2.5 billion that we have added to that funding. So this summer, there will be a little over $460 million for construction at Warren Air Force Base for my new missile system. In the fall, another 140 million will be added to that. That goes into your pocket. So please keep up with what we're doing with our advocacy efforts and watch those. Be a part of it if you can. I know some of you can't join us this year. And how many of you have gone to DC with us? So grab one of those people. They can tell you why we go, and after you go once, I think you clearly understand the purpose of what we're trying to do. Couple other things on the cards this month. So our annual banquet coming up in June, we do awards at our annual banquet. We use that to celebrate people in our community that are doing great things. How do we get those nominations? From you. So those nominations are open, and we send it out in our newsletter every week. We'll try to send a couple of specific emails, but I'm certain that you know somebody in your business, in your community, in your organization that needs to be recognized for the wonderful work they do to make Cheyenne a great place to live and work and do business. We can't find all of them without you, so help us identify those folks. Next month is Military May. That luncheon is May 5th at Little America, so that's always a great one to come to, where we honor some of our local men and women in uniform. So look forward to that. Our business after hours on the 20th of this month, and that is going to be at the airport. I don't think they have any flights right now. They're repairing the runway, but be a good business after hours. So hope all of you get that on your phone. All right, we'll do our house line. NG1 from Flying Wyoming. So Andy knows how the drill works. You can see my stuff. Six 663-5993. Have a great weekend, everyone, and now we'll ask Paula Boyford, your chairman, come forward and introduce our speaker for today.
Thank you so much, Jill. It's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Chuck Gray was elected Secretary of State for the great state of Wyoming in November of 22 and assumed office this past January. As the Secretary of State, Secretary Gray is responsible for registering all businesses in the state of Wyoming, as well as handling our elections. We're honored to have the Secretary visit with us today and share with us his vision for Wyoming business. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming your Secretary of State to the podium.
Great to be with you today. We had a special SLIB meeting call today, so stepped away for a little bit for this and just very appreciative of the invitation. And also want to start out by just wishing everyone a peaceful, reflective Good Friday. Always debated when I did a radio show how to start on Good Friday, and it's just very reflective. So thank you for having me here today. It was about 10 months ago that I decided to enter the Secretary of State's race. I've been a legislator for about 6 years, representing portions of East Casper. I actually have very fond memories of the Red Lions where I stayed. They had a really good rate, $49. I stayed at this place every year I was a legislator. But had a very conservative record of not just talking the talk, but walking the walk. And when Ed Buchanan decided to apply for a district court judgeship that was up in Goshen County, decided to enter the race, and it came up about a week and a half before the end of the filing period, and really discerned whether to get into the race and decided to do that. A couple of reasons why I decided to do that. Well, for one, I've worked on a lot of elections issues, and the Secretary of State, while it also has jurisdiction over business, and we'll get to that in a moment, the election issue is one that's very near and dear to my heart and one that I have worked on. When I got to the legislature in 2017, thought it was just outrageous that we didn't have a voter ID law. And filed it in 2018, came up a little short. Filed it in 2019, came up a little short. Filed it in 2020, came up a little short. But then in 2021, the clerks got on board with the bill and we were able to pass voter ID in the state of Wyoming. And that was implemented here in our 2022 elections. So I worked on these elections issues and really felt called to move into the executive branch. I don't think anything is forever. Never wanted to serve in the legislature for more than 10 years, and decided to get in that race. And it was a very vibrant race over three and a half months. And we traveled over 30,000 miles in that 3-month period. And I want to thank you for your support in that. My focus on that race was always about improving. And one thing I've seen in politics is very interesting. There's oftentimes two camps, and it almost transcends ideology. There's a certain camp that says, well, everything's fine and we don't need to improve. And then there's one camp that emphasizes the opposite side, emphasizes that improvement. And that's what I tried to do on the campaign and what I've been trying to do here in the first 3.5, 4 months in office. And I think it's worked, emphasizing customer service in our business division. And I always think the electorate wants someone that is going to acknowledge that need for improvement. I think that helped us to get across the finish line. Let's start out here today, though, and go through some of the duties of the office, and then what happened in the session and some of the visions that we're hoping to effectuate over the coming 3 3/4 years, because I'm doing the math all the time. How much of our term has gone past? And the other day I looked, it was about 4%. So every day we got to get up and focus. I tell our staff, every day we got to have at least a 3-yard run and move the ball forward. So we have the business division, which does all of our business filings, and Wyoming has become a top 3 in the nation in these business filings. Our compliance division has jurisdiction over broker-dealers, investment advisors, and also the notaries. Our elections division has jurisdiction over elections, and then you can see our fiscal and technology divisions provide support to the previous three. Now, one note here is the role of the Secretary of State on constitutional boards and our constitutional duties. The Secretary of State is in the Wyoming State Constitution slated as the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Wyoming. So when the governor's out of state or something happens, God forbid, the Secretary of State serves in that capacity. We also serve on these boards and commissions. The State Board of Land Commissioners, which has jurisdiction over state lands. We met yesterday, considered a number of matters, including a proposed land exchange in Sheridan County, which did fail. The State Loan and Investment Board, which of course has jurisdiction over Wyoming Business Council approvals. So all the Wyoming Business Council projects come before the State Loan and Investment Boards. We had 2 projects come before us yesterday, one in Gillette and one in Casper, and they both passed. One in Sundance was withdrawn. And then, and also has a lot of jurisdiction over lending programs that the legislature authorizes. And then the State Building Commission, which has jurisdiction over state buildings, and specifically the Capitol, which is always controversial in terms of how the executive branch interplays with the legislative branch. The bill that actually lays out the division of duties, I mean, it literally goes floor by floor and room by room, which one's the executive branch has jurisdiction over and which one the legislature has jurisdiction over. In terms of the business division, just run through some of our filings: nonprofits, profit corporations, limited liabilities companies, limited partnerships, statutory trusts, trade names, and trademarks. And one thing I want to note here is we are deciding whether to move to a more automated system. We're not going to take away any services, but we're looking at a revamped online system for our online filings. We would like to get feedback from individuals on that. It is going to be a little bit of a cost. The state is going to undertake for that about $3 million, but it's something that we're evaluating in terms of an ask for the legislature. And I think that's going to improve our product. Our customer service is one of my key priorities. It's been a point of emphasis for me in hiring a lead on the business division. Our business division is actually going to be staffed and chaired by Colin Crossman. We made that hire 2 weeks ago, and he is starting on Monday. Jordan Gray, no relation to myself, she was the acting director, and she's going to step back into the assistant director role and continue in that role. And she has oversight over registered agents. Just some of the numbers here, just the amount of work that comes through the business division. It is amazing. I mean, if you ever get over in the Capitol, I'd love to show you around our business division and the amount that we process. $66 million of revenue every biennium that the business division generates. So it's one of the few agencies that is a revenue generator and a profit center for the state. Want to run through some of our legislative goals and how we did in the legislative session. One of the key priorities for our office is getting a hold on foreign ownership of agricultural land. This was a bill, there were 2 bills. House Bill 88 was brought by Representative Allman, and House Bill 116 brought by Representative Banks. And my feeling on it is that states have restricted this ownership, and we need to protect our ag lands and our lands in the state of Wyoming. And I was a huge proponent of it. Obviously, we got to get the language right in terms of grandfathering existing lands that are problematic, and then also some of the soda ash companies in Southwest Wyoming that are foreign owned. But overall, this is about protecting the state of Wyoming, and it's moving to the interim. So I'm hoping to play a role in that, because ultimately the oversight of this was always going to come through the Secretary of State's office in terms of asking these entities to file and indicate that they are foreign entities. If they own lands currently, and then if there is a disposal process, depending on what version of the bill goes through the legislature, what that procedure would be. And then also if they end up going down the route of saying, well, future lands can't be owned by foreign entities, or restricting it to terrorist entities that are linked to terrorist organizations, then what that procedure would be. So we're continuing to work on that. We'd definitely like to take feedback on it. SF 76 was the Digital Asset Registration Act. That did pass. And so the idea there is that entities will be able to register their digital assets to gain jurisdiction in our Chancery Court, which was started in Casper. One of the reasons why Delaware is so popular in terms of business entity filings is because of that line of precedent that has been built in that Chancery Court there. So it was 3 years ago, Senator Drew Perkins at that time brought a bill to create a Chancery Court and ended up being awarded to Casper. The idea with this bill is one, to provide some work to that Chancery Court because it has not been very busy. It has been staffed by other judges in the district court system. And to sort of get a niche for that court, which would be to resolve disputes related to digital assets and to get that first mover advantage on that. I'm a little skeptical whether it's going to work, but the legislature ultimately decided to pass it, and we will be executing that through our office and have that system up, and the rulemaking process will proceed over the coming 6 months, and that'll be up on January 1st is when that goes into effect. The other thing that I'm very concerned about is addressing abuses of Title 17, especially around the cowboy cocktail, which we've seen the reporting from, usually I call them the Washington Compost, but I do think on the cowboy cocktail, they had some valid reporting on it. And I haven't seen one person in the state of Wyoming that wants foreign entities, Russian and Ukrainian oligarchs to take advantage of our business filings to hide assets so they can get around taxes or whatever illegal activity they're trying to do there. And there is some evidence that that is happening. So we need to get a handle on that and looking to form a working group to do that. We had one bill which was brought by Senator Case on trust corporations, asking them to release some data that currently they're not required to, and that did fail. With the thought that in the interim, with the new Secretary of State, that we could have that conversation over the coming 9 months. And I'm okay with that because we need to get this right. I mean, while there are some bad actors, we don't want good actors that want to be able to be somewhat anonymous to be catched into that inappropriately. So it's always a balance. Elections. This was a huge priority for us in the recently completed general session, and we were very successful. Our number one priority was ending crossover voting, which every year I've been a member of the legislature, we had tried to end crossover voting, and every year it had failed. And you go back on the website, it goes back to year 2000, almost every single year they had attempted to do this. So this was our number one priority, and it was a big lift. If you asked me at the start of the session, I would have said, well, we got maybe a 25% chance to get this through, but we were able to. And the governor allowed it to become law. Over on the Senate side, there were some questions on the language, and we cleared those up in terms of implementing this. This will not apply to new registration. So if someone is dropped off the voter roll, someone is coming to Wyoming from another jurisdiction, they live here now, and now they're registering, or if they turn 18, the deadline in this crossover voting, which is going to be May 15th, or the day before the beginning of the filing period, will not apply to them. But if you are currently registered, you cannot cross over after that date. And of course, we had seen in these Republican primaries, which statewide is where the action's at, unless you're in Albany or Teton County, huge swaths of people cross over into the Republican primary, and it's just inappropriate. So I'm so glad that we got a handle on this, and we got a good lockout date of the day before the beginning of the filing period. Have this handled, hopefully for perpetuity. The other thing we wanted to do was strengthen our voter ID requirements. It's been a huge priority of mine. When we brought the voter ID bill on the books in 2021, there were a few concessions we had to make. As any good piece of legislation, usually there are some concessions, but a few loopholes as well. And one of those was individuals requesting an absentee ballot in person were not required to show voter ID in some counties. Some counties interpreted the bill to require that. And I can tell you, as the drafter of that bill originally, my intent was always that all in-person voting, all voting with an in-person nexus would require a voter ID. And then the absentee ballots, those that are requested remotely, are a different matter. And there are 2 states that have put in place voter ID requirements for absentee ballots, but the compromise was to bifurcate those 2 things and to pass voter ID in 2021 with the in-person nexus. Well, then you got one of these nuances, which was individuals trying to request an absentee ballot in person. And to me, that is a voting process that is beginning with an in-person nexus. And some clerks disagreed with that, and so we clarified that in statute and said that that would require a voter ID because it became a loophole way for individuals to get around the voter ID requirement in person. Also, we are very opposed to ranked choice voting. Some jurisdictions have done this. Alaska, Utah has experimented with it. So it's really wacky. They ask you to rank every single at one time. Now, runoff is a whole different matter. You narrow it down to 2 people and then move into a runoff. That's a different matter. But ranked choice voting is on the ballot where you're asked to rank all of the candidates. And then if your top choice ends up being eliminated, then they move to your next choice. So it presents challenges. I mean, if you have 10 races on your ballot with an average of 4 or 5 candidates each, a lot of people don't fill that out. And that means that the ballot's not counted as you move down the list. That's called ballot exhaustion. And so it's very problematic. I'm not a big fan of this ranked choice voting. It makes the ballot very confusing. Jurisdictions that have done this, New York City, Alaska, it takes them 2-3 weeks to count their ballots. I don't think that's a good thing either. I mean, we see that justifiably, people want the results that evening. And I can tell you with the ranked choice process, that is not going to happen. So we successfully defeated that, which I was very, very thrilled about. And then also increasing transparency was a huge priority for us. Ed Buchanan, in the last year of his term, had reversed 20 years of practice in terms of the voter rolls in not releasing what's called a voter ID number and also the absentee status for the voter. A voter ID number is a unique number that everybody is assigned when they register. And why it is important to release when it's requested from individuals is because it ensures that double voting is not happening. So when you vote across jurisdictional lines, if someone tried to do that, or if they cross state lines, if you cross state lines and tried to vote twice, cross county lines and tried to vote twice, that voter ID number is one of the ways that that double vote would be identified. And so one of the things I asked my council to do when we entered office was to reevaluate that change in policy, and we reversed it back to the way it was over the previous 20 years. And when we examined the statute, while it was somewhat ambiguous, if you look at the intent of the legislature, it was pretty clear that they wanted that data to be released. And then sure enough, the legislature actually codified what we did and clarified that in state statute by passing House Bill 5, which we were very supportive of. House Bill 6 was another win, I think, in increasing transparency. What that bill would have done is basically would have prevented any eyeball examination of a ballot ever. There's this whole controversy over whether we should have hand counts to back up the machines. I think it would be good. Now, process-wise, how do we carry that out? That's something we're grappling with. And then also releasing what's called the CDR, which is an image of the ballot that doesn't have any identifiable markings of who cast that ballot. But what it does is it's a check on the machine because that ballot image can be cross-checked with the annotation of how the machine counted the ballot. And so if House Bill 6 had passed, basically, it would have clarified in statute that none of that could be released under any circumstances. And I personally think that is way too far in a negative direction. And we were able to defeat that. We're moving that to the interim discussion in terms of what the proper balance is there. The other discussion we're having in the interim is on residency requirement. There was a Supreme Court decision in the 70s that undid our constitutional residency requirement of a year that was in the Wyoming state constitution. And we really need to provide statutory guidance there because that has been undone by the state Supreme Court. The clerks have asked for that, and our office has also asked for the legislature to examine it. Let's shift gears here. Oh, one other bill that I was not thrilled about failing. It was vetoed by the governor in a last-minute veto, and the last day the vetoes were possible. What it would have done is ban, I'm sure many of you got Liz Cheney at the end of the election cycle, sent out these bogus absentee ballot request forms where she tried to impersonate the county clerk and encourage people to send in these absentee ballot requests speaking as the county clerk. And it was really inappropriate. It reduced voter confidence. The office got a ton of complaints. I was not yet in office, but we evaluated a lot of those complaints. And what we wanted to do was ban this practice. Unfortunately, the governor vetoed it. He didn't like the wording. We can get into that in the Q&A if you're interested. It's something I think that's important to do because we've seen an influx of third-party monies. It's called Zuck Bucks. It's not just Zuckerberg, though. It's a lot of wealthy individuals that want to influence elections. And one of the ways they do it is to pay for these phony absentee ballot request forms in areas where they want to turn out the vote. And really, those should be initiated by an official. It's fine in a mailer to say, look, here's how you request an absentee ballot. But if you're going to have an absentee ballot request form, it should have a nexus from an official, whether it's the clerk or the Secretary of State's office. So that was an unfortunate veto. And all of these changes, I mean, this goes back to the campaign, and the media always tries to portray me in a certain way and call me names or whatever. They throw around election denier or whatever. I was in DC the other day and they were throwing that around. It's about increasing voter confidence. It goes back to the voter ID bill. I mean, there is a crisis of confidence in our elections, and traveling around the state, I can tell you, it's real. And these provisions are dramatic improvements. I can tell you that voter ID, I mean, while there's room for us to continue to expand it, improve it, I didn't see one person on the campaign trail that didn't like it. And I have heard a lot of concerns on the ballot drop boxes as well, and we're hoping to handle that in the interim. All right, let's shift over to the compliance division. The compliance division has oversight over broker-dealers, investors, and then also in statute is tasked with carrying out investor awareness and also commissioning notaries public. So there's some of the numbers on it, a lot of work coming through there. Oh, by the way, on the customer service, and I'll have my number at the end, really, if you execute a notary or a business filing, I want to know how we did it. So I'm going to have my cell at the end. It's 251-1372. Text, call me on your thoughts on how our office did, because I want us to always be improving and have made that a key priority for our staff. And I think it's working. I just got 3 texts this week, just unsolicited, from individuals that said really had a good experience with the Secretary of State's office. We're looking at doing a relaunch on our investor awareness during COVID. That was kind of put on the back burner a little bit in the Secretary of State's office. And there's also a trust that has sort of being wound down, funds that have been allocated for investor awareness. So we have a little bit of funding, and we're going to be launching that over the summer, and would love to get feedback from the Cheyenne Chamber and about that. A couple other things before we move into Q&A. Wanted to talk about policy and my thoughts on where our state is headed from 30,000 feet up. Some of these things are items coming through our office and some are not. And the media is always criticizing me. They say, because I testify at committee meetings, that they said it was uncouth and unstately to testify at a committee meeting. It's amazing. Meanwhile, the superintendent, the governor testifies all the time, and they say nothing. But it's just amazing, the media and the double standard. It always kind of cracks me up. But a couple things I wanted to talk about is On the budget front, it is so important that we do not squander the influx of revenues that has occurred over the last 2.5 years. I mean, even you think back in 2019 and 2018 when we were just broke. I mean, I was a legislator and we were counting down the number of years before our cash reserves would be depleted. And it is so important, you know, we have this, somewhat the ship has already set sail on this. I mean, I'm very concerned about the legislature capping LISRO, which is our cash savings account. It's kind of our lifeline of $1.4 billion. If we do see a downturn in revenues, which I would say 9 out of 10 chance over the next 5 years, we're going to have a down cycle. We could very quickly have a cash crunch, and they've moved a lot of these funds into permanent investments, which then the returns off those investments are used to fund a lot of slush fund projects in the general fund or in SIPA, which is our capital construction building account. The problem is, though, our revenue base is so boom and bust. And I know there may be disagreement with me in this room on this. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's more than enough revenue to fund Wyoming state government across a boom bust cycle. The reality, though, is that you have to save during the boom periods. And that's where the challenge, it's a political challenge because politicians like to spend money. It's a political challenge, but if you save more during those boom periods and you have a cap there or some other sort of discipline mechanism, you have more than enough in cash reserves that can be invested in sort of light investments that can be cashed out very quickly. And then say anything over, say, $1.5 billion in our cash reserves are invested in medium-term investments. That's how I would do it. The legislature has gone down a very, very different road of capping our cash at $1.4 billion, moving the remainder into either inviolate accounts that can constitutionally never be pulled back or politically accounts that are almost impossible to pull back, and investing those and earmarking those investment returns rather than saying, hey, we're going to put those proceeds into cash savings, which can then go into our core deficit, which is in schools. And I'm very concerned that we're ultimately going to have a cash crunch here in the medium term. And it requires leadership in the legislature, and it requires leadership from the executive branch to ensure that doesn't happen. And we don't go back to this argument during the bust periods that somehow there's a need for a tax increase, because there's not. The reality is we just need to become more responsible during those periods when we're quite flush. I want to talk a little about property tax, which is something I'm passionate about. As a member of the legislature, brought a number of property tax relief proposals before it became in vogue. Yeah, it was. Over 20 property tax proposals, and the year we first brought one in 2021, I think there were 2. So I kind of saw this coming. I mean, in Casper, Natrona County in 2020, 2021, we had 800, 900% increases on Casper Mountain. I think the approach that I want to go with is a cap. There's an argument that it's unconstitutional. Okay, let's amend the Constitution. And there was an attempt to do that in the legislative session. And there was this group that just said no. And it's the same group that says it's not constitutional. Well, if you're going to say that any statutory cap is unconstitutional and then be opposed to any attempt to remedy that, I mean, the only conclusion is that group doesn't want property tax relief, or at least widespread property tax relief. I mean, the reality is that you would need a cap or an acquisition value system to provide that. But the approach the legislature has gone with so far is a refund program, which I'm sure you've seen if you look to attain property tax relief. It's very limited. I think we need some sort of control, and even if that cap is, I mean, we can talk about what the number is, but I think the cap is the answer. And that's the medium-term solution once we get a constitutional amendment. The short-term solution, in my opinion, was an exemption. And LSO said that passed constitutional muster. There was a debate about whether to exempt the first 50 grand of everybody's house, or the first 100 grand of it'd be one property. One property, you'd be allowed to exempt if you lived in the state of Wyoming for 6 months. I thought that was the short-term fix. It was clearly constitutional. Unfortunately, it failed in the Senate Revenue Committee after passing in the House. But it's not just a Natrona Teton issue now. I mean, it's across our state. It's definitely an issue here in Laramie County. On state lands, as a member of the SLIP board, I want to tell you that we really need to manage these state lands in a Wyoming first way. Very concerned about some cases in Commerce County, and we had a case yesterday in terms of the customer service going to the state lands office and some state leases being rejected for somewhat ticky-tack reasons with no communication to the individual trying to renew their lease. So we really need to button that up. And just like I've emphasized customer service in the Secretary of State's office yesterday in our State Board of Land Commissioners meeting, I emphasized that to the state land office. Well, my number is 251-1372. I guess I moved off the slide. So that's my cell. That's a direct line. So if you want to contact me anytime, 24/7. I gave that out on this TV interview we did the other day, and I got this call at 1:08 a.m. But I've had that happen 3 or 4 times, which is fun. When you say you're open 24/7, people are going to take you up on it. So I really enjoy serving the state of Wyoming, as a legislature, and I really do believe in the part-time legislature. But I was only able to do public service part-time, and now in the Secretary of State's office, it's a full-time job, and I'm very happy in this role and want us to achieve our full potential in the office. So I want to get your feedback. Assume there's some time for Q&A. I believe they slated us till 1 on the speech itself, and I would like to get your feedback. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. If you want to state in the Q&A, please raise your hand and I'll read the next one.
For being here today. So we have an interest in foreign ownership here, especially around military facilities, around the state, and something that can be, Secretary of the Air Force and others that put to keep China and Russia, some of our adversaries, owning that property. I think as we work through that, one of the questions is, or the question I have for you, how do you see that balance of, right, keeping our adversaries from owning our ag lands, our property around military facilities, electrical plants, etc., and yet encourage good foreign investment into our state to make sure that we have a good future economically?
It is a balance. The Alleman bill, talking earlier about the 2 approaches, the Alleman bill limited restrictions on foreign ownership to terrorist jurisdictions. So federally, that label they use, a terrorist, a nation state that is linked to a terrorist entity. And I think there's 4 right now. So I thought that was pretty narrowly tailored. I'm concerned about the Chinese influence, and that gets to Representative Banks' bill, which was more wide-ranging. And so I think the answer is, if we bring forward Representative Alleman's bill and take a list in terms of which ones we're going to restrict and add to it, and then have a disposal process for lands that are currently owned by those entities, and then have a restriction moving forward. That's the way I would do it. I know the soda ash folks are pretty concerned about these approaches, but the way both of those bills were worded, it would not have affected soda ash. They still testified against it. And I understand, I mean, they get nervous no matter what, but it would not have affected those entities. And I think it's unfortunate too. I mean, I'll add a little bit of editorial here. I mean, the legislature did not want that bill to pass. It became very clear, and they added I think it ended up at a $200 million appropriation or something. It was just outrageous. So there's all these techniques to try to add poison pills to bills as they move through the process. So there's an excuse for a no vote, right? And one of them is to add these outrageous appropriations, and that's what they did on the foreign ownership bills. And we disagreed with it. We submitted a fiscal note saying that there would be no added cost to our office, and they came up with a counter to that. And that's one of the reasons why those bills did not move forward. But certainly, we've got to be careful and make sure we do it right. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much, Secretary Gray. We're so grateful for the time you took today to speak with the Cheyenne business community. We look forward to continuing and strengthening our community through our partnership. I do want to say thank you all for coming today and have a blessed Easter weekend and Good Friday. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.